What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 3 must-draft running backs that I think you guys should be looking to target in your fantasy football drafts this season. For whatever reason, I just think these players are a little bit undervalued, and I think when we're looking back on this season, they're going to end up looking like smash picks. These guys are also going to be kind of spread out throughout the draft, so we have an early round guy, someone going in the middle rounds, and then a running back who's probably going to be going more in like the double-digit rounds, so 10 plus. Let me know your thoughts on these 3 players. Any other fantasy questions, you can drop them down below. But let's just dive right into it. We're going to start off with the early round guy, and it's going to be Devon Achane. He's currently going off the board as the running back 8, and I think since he is such a unique fantasy running back, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are just straight up out on him. I know even my running back video, someone said it, like they're just like, I can't draft Achane, and I kind of get it, right? He's not your typical workhorse size. He's 5'9", 190. That's not the size of dude you're drafting here in like the first 2 rounds of your fantasy drafts. And then he also didn't have like the huge RB1 workload that you're expecting, right? You're not drafting a Derrick Henry 20 plus carries a game. In 2023, he averaged 9.4 carries and 3.4 targets per game. He also barely had over a 40% opportunity share, which is pretty much unheard of. Like last season or heading into last season, we had Tony Pollard, who was like maybe just below a 50% opportunity share, and he was giving you RB1 production, and that was very, very rare. And Achane's opportunity share was even lower than Tony Pollard's in 2022, but he still managed to finish as the running back 5 in points per game. I also have to point out that his workload numbers and opportunity share, percentage is a little bit skewed because I believe he played in 11 total games, and in 2 of those, he played less than 10% of the snaps. So I think the first one was like week 2, where he was still kind of working his way into the offense. He was just getting garbage time. And then the second one, he left like really early on with injury. But if we remove those 2 games where it's not his real workload, he would have been up to 11.2 carries, 3.9 targets per game, which is still nothing crazy, but like 15 opportunities, it's a lot better than, 12 or whatever we were looking at before. And also, if we remove those 2 games, he would have averaged 20.8 PPR points per game. So he really does have that elite ceiling at the running back position. Even though, he's not your typical early round fantasy running back, I feel like he's just such a perfect fit in this Mike McDaniel offense. We know he's going to be ultra efficient with that pairing. He was by far the best running back in rushing yards over expected per attempt last season at 2.87. Christian McCaffrey was number 2, and Achane doubled up his number, more than doubled up his number. So just a crazy season. He also led all running backs in yards per touch, breakaway run rate, and fantasy points per opportunity. When we look at his competition, I still think this is going to be a committee. I don't think they want to force feed Achane. That's not why I want to draft him here. But you have Raheem Mostert, who's 32 years old. He could really fall off at any point. And then you have 4th round rookie Jalen Wright. So I'd be shocked if Achane was not leading a committee this season, even if it's 55-45. That 55 with Achane's ability, his efficiency, I think that can deliver an insane fantasy ceiling. We know he's going to rip off big plays. He's going to have touchdown upside, even if they're not feeding him on the goal line. And he's also a very strong pass catcher, so he does check a lot of those boxes. I feel like if you're getting him anywhere like mid-second round or later, in my opinion, that's a value. I'd be willing to take him like early round 2 territory, mid round 2, totally fine. Anytime after that, I'd just be smashing the draft button on Devon Achane. Now shifting over to my second must-draft running back, more of a mid-round guy, we're going to Jonathan Brooks. He's currently being drafted as the running back 24. It's like a back-end RB2, almost a high-end RB3. And I feel like the main concern that people have for Jonathan Brooks is that he's coming off a torn ACL. And I think that's definitely, a fair reason to be concerned. We have history of running backs not doing great in their first year off the torn ACL. But I do feel like in general, the concerns being a little bit overblown here. All the reports about his recovery have been positive. The injury happened on November 11th, and typically the timetable for an ACL recovery is like 9 to 12 months. Brooks, the reports have been good. It was also a clean ACL tear from my understanding. There wasn't like the MCL, all that other damage, like that was not there. So a 9-month recovery would put him at August 11th, which is almost a month before the season, and it seems like that's kind of the track he's on here. It's always scary to invest in players coming off an ACL, but I was someone who was very in on Breece Hall last year. Even though he was coming off the torn ACL, I really liked him. I had a lot of shares of him. His recovery reports were really positive leading into the season. He was young. He was a top athlete. Brooks checks those same boxes where the reports have been good. He's still 20 years old, which is crazy for a prospect. And then also he's a really good athlete. So if I was going to bet on someone coming off a torn ACL, it would be someone with that kind of profile. Looking at his actual skill set, he is a true 3-down running back, can catch passes. He's a really strong pure runner, and clearly the Panthers and their new head coach Dave Canales are very high on him. They used a mid-round 2 pick on him, which at the running back position in this day's NFL is very significant. Even though we saw Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs go early round 1, mid-round 1 last year, that is not something we're going to see consistently. So mid-round 2 capital coming off a torn ACL, that's a big deal here for Jonathan Brooks. We saw Dave Canales last season use Rachaad White like the workhorse. I think Brooks is going to be the way better NFL running back. I think he's way more talented. And he's already talked about how he wants to use Jonathan Brooks traditionally like your typical running back, but he also wants to scheme up opportunities in the passing game. I really feel like Jonathan Brooks is going to have a massive ceiling in this Panthers offense. And I feel like if he was not injured, like if we were living in a world where he was just healthy, heading into 2024, I feel like we're looking at this running back room. It's pretty wide open. He's going to have that receiving upside. I feel like you could make an argument for him as like a fringe RB1 play. So I think going from like a fringe RB1 to RB24, I think it's just too steep of a drop-off to deal with that injury. If you're drafting Brooks, I do think you have to understand there might be a slow start to the season. I don't think he's going to look like a must-draft running back through the first 4 weeks. Like we definitely could be getting kind of a gross split early on with Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, guys like that. But I feel like in the long term, throughout the rest of the season, second half, I really feel like he's going to break away, and I think he really should look like a league winner, towards the end of the season. Now, shifting into my third and final must-draft running back, it's going to be Taj Spears. He's currently going off the board as the running back 38, so he's being drafted as like an RB4, and I just feel like there are a variety of different ways that Taj Spears pays off at this price. I think worst case scenario for Taj Spears, most would probably agree, it's like he's the locked in running back 2 behind Tony Pollard, who's taking a huge chunk of the offense. So in that scenario, he's pretty much like a handcuff, and he'd be probably one of the better handcuffs in the NFL. And we're not seeing handcuff running backs get drafted much later than like RB38. So like his floor projection is a really, really good handcuff. And even at this price, it wouldn't be that crazy. But I definitely don't think that's like the most realistic outcome here. I don't think Tony Pollard's heading into this season as the locked-in, clear-cut running back 1, like going to take 65+% of the opportunities, and then Taj Spears like the clear RB2. I just don't think that's the case heading into this season. I was someone who was really, really in on Tony Pollard heading into last year. He had been so efficient throughout his career in kind of like a split role with Ezekiel Elliott. But when he got the full-time job, it just did not transition over. He had a pretty rough 2023 season, worst yards per carry of his career, worst yards per reception of his career. He was also just super unsuccessful in the red zone, so I don't think it's a guarantee that like Taj Spears isn't getting those opportunities, or at least splitting those opportunities. Tony Pollard was second in the NFL in red zone touches, had 9 goal line carries, only ended up with 6 touchdowns, which was 24th. So second most red zone touches, 24th in touchdowns. That's a rough season. We're looking at Taj Spears. He had a solid rookie year. He wasn't overly efficient as a runner. He was actually 1 spot above Tony Pollard in rushing yards over expected per attempt, but he was very involved in the receiving game. 70 targets, 59 receptions, 385 receiving yards. I talked about the potential handcuff route for Taj Spears. That's a possible outcome. I also think there's the outcome where this is a committee, a fairly close committee. Both running backs are probably like weekly RB3 plays, which, nothing crazy. It's not going to be a league-winning option for you. But if you're getting RB3 production out of someone you're drafting as an RB4, that's a win at his current ADP. I also think in that same situation, in a close committee, if this offense overachieves, which isn't something I'm like banking on, but it's something that's definitely possible. Will Levis heading into year 2 has a year of experience. They brought in new weapons for him. They're clearly kind of trying to build around him here for the Titans. If this offense overachieves, I think both guys in a committee could end up being like back-end RB2s. Also a win here at his current price. And then I think there's also the route where Taj Spears just ends up being the lead back. I feel like that's not being considered in his ADP. And I'm not saying it's like a probable situation, but that outcome is definitely there. He could just straight up beat Tony Pollard out. Or maybe, they start off in a committee, he starts to pull away later on in the season. Like, these are all real possibilities. So I just feel like Taj Spears right now is kind of being drafted pretty close to his floor. as the running back 38. And that's going to wrap it up for my 3 must-draft running backs. We had Devon Achane, Jonathan Brooks, and Taj Spears. Let me know how you guys are feeling about those 3 running backs. Do you have your own running back that you're really in on? You think you're going to have a ton of shares of them in fantasy football? If you do, drop them down below. But thank you all for stopping by. Stay tuned for my must-draft wide receiver video. That'll be coming out tomorrow. But thank you again, and I will see you all in the next one.